I kind of want to, flash back to kind of what we're talking about when it came to Josh Allen's targets. We talked about man coverage, how they had a lot of drops. And I've just been on this kick lately where, again, I'm comparing this year, which is probably unfair, to 2020 and how efficient they were. But it's kind of what was needed this year for Josh Allen in this offense, especially when you talked about the easy button, like when you're talking a new offensive coordinator who should know the track and way to get Josh Allen on track, right? You would think a guy in the room with him for the last several years would have the easy button answers, but that wasn't always the case. But when I look back, and we talked about adding Cole Beasley and John Brown, when I look back to that 2020 and how they used those guys and where they really attacked, it was really the middle of the field, Anthony. So I want to start with that because I felt like at times this year, the Bills really avoided throwing it over the middle. And so, you know what? Let me bring it up. I think there's a reason behind that. And it starts with the weapons, and it starts with Josh Allen. So let's take a look at that. So they avoided the middle of the field a bunch. So let's look at interceptions. Let's look at drops. Okay. So deep center. So that's 20 yards or more in the middle of the field. He had 3 interceptions there. Intermediate center. So that's 10 to 19 yards. He had 2 interceptions there. Short center. So that's 0 to 9 yards in the middle of the field. He had 2 interceptions. Now let's go look at the drops in those very same areas over the middle of the field. Deep center, only 1 drop. Intermediate center, 6 drops. 6 drops, 2 interceptions in the intermediate area, which is 10 to 19 yards. And then short center, middle of the field, 0 to 9 yards, 7 drops. So it's pretty apparent that Josh Allen throwing over the middle of the field probably got a little gun shy at times because he didn't really have weapons that he could trust. So it led to interceptions and it led to a lot of drops.
And then I think that also led to some of the predictability we saw in this offense as the season went on. Like you saw him almost by default looking towards the numbers or looking outside the numbers. And those throws are going to be lower percentage just because they're farther than right over the middle of the field. He pushed the ball downfield as well, kind of just give himself some more leeway. And, now you're bringing up this heat map from Stefan Diggs. And
just to give an example, this is Diggs's distribution where he caught where passes were caught, where they were incomplete in his touchdowns. And you can see the completions they're pretty concentrated in that short area, but also towards the middle of the field, right? I know, right?
Yeah.
But so this is weeks 1 through 9. So you heard Diggs talk about that, how things kind of change. So short area, middle of the field. Now this is weeks 10 and beyond. You can see a lot of those completions started to be closer to the numbers and even more along the boundaries, Anthony. So again, this is just Diggs, but it gives you an idea how they kind of avoided throwing over the middle of the field.
Yeah, it was an area that, Josh clearly didn't feel comfortable going towards from a target perspective. And I also think, again, tying it back to the roster piece or the weapons piece, they just didn't have that consistency in the slot and that person to really affect the middle of the field. So much of what Cole Beasley did, his work came, not just because he was in the slot, but if you're in the slot, you're the closest person in proximity to the middle of the field, and his ability to work in that spot and how it opened up avenues and layers for the rest of the offense was a huge piece. And they didn't get that this year from Isaiah McKenzie or Jamison Crowder, really, even before he was hurt. And then you added in on top of this graphic where you look at the short area production from 0 to 9 yards, the leaders on the Bills the last 3 years. Eric, these numbers are drastic from 2022 versus 21 and 20.
Yeah, just look at the targets and the ranking in parentheses. So 0 to 9 yards, short area, the top 2 receivers in that area on the Bills over the last 3 years. So Diggs had 78 targets. That was ranked 4th in that area. And McKenzie for the Bills had 41 targets, which was ranked 40th in 2022. And you can see some of the other numbers that kind of accompany that. But look at the targets for 2021. Beasley had 79 targets in that 0 to 9 range, which was 5th overall. And Diggs had 77, which was 7th overall. Now, if you go back to 2020, Diggs had 92 targets in that 0 to 9 range, which was 2nd overall. Beasley had 76, which was 10th overall. So again, having that crutch, and these aren't all over the middle, but those are the separator type wide receivers that the Bills like, the crutch, that hot route or sight adjustment in the middle of the field or inside the numbers there when they need a play. those guys were making it in that 0 to 9 yard range.
Stefan Diggs is Josh Allen's #1 guy, but Cole Beasley has been his security blanket the past several years, and missing that security blanket significantly impacted him, as did, missing that consistency in that role. Even just looking from a numbers perspective, Stefan Diggs saw the second highest slot percentage from a snap share perspective, his second highest usage rate in the slot of his career this past year at 34.1%. That was second only to his second year in Minnesota, where he was mainly in the slot at 63%. But again, he was in the slot this year, 34.1%. In 2021, he was in the slot 21% of the time. So a 13 percentage point increase. Even Dawson Knox, his slot usage went up 6 percentage points, 47.9 this year versus 41.7 in 2021. We saw the impact that not having that security blanket, whether specifically in Cole Beasley or just in somebody who could navigate that role, we saw the impact it had on the offense. And it's part of the reason to give some of you folks a little focus as we move forward in the offseason. A lot of the focus for us in looking for a wide receiver in the draft or in free agency isn't necessarily just about like, well, you got to get a wide receiver too, or you got to get this. What you need somebody who can operate in the slot in a fashion that fits what Josh Allen and this offense needs, a la Cole Beasley. You need somebody who is like a younger Cole Beasley who can offer you that consistency and security on the inside.
Yeah. And, you talked about the percentage of that Diggs was in the slot. That's fine. Like, moving him around is great. We like that all year this year. Yeah. But when they bumped him inside, then they lost a boundary wide receiver, a boundary threat. And that used to be, again, that was like a John Brown, right? He would be out there. So it would be Diggs and Brown on the outside. Gabriel Davis is fine as a boundary wide receiver. They basically didn't use him in the slot at all. So when they bumped Diggs inside, you lost a boundary threat out there. McKenzie wasn't that guy. Shakir wasn't quite ready. And they obviously brought Brown back for that reason. And so that really tells you something. And to kind of cap off, attacking the middle of the field, finding that receiver that can not only play the boundary, but bump inside, a diverse set, maybe it's an early wide receiver, but either way, they need to get someone to help in the middle of the field. Maybe that is Diggs as he translates later into his career, and maybe he becomes that slot guy that is the crutch for this offense. But then you do have to add that other guy outside. Why, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for that compliment. So to kind of cap this off, if you look at quarterback passes by direction in 2020, again, we talked about it several times, Josh Allen in the middle of the field. Look at mid DYAR and mid DVOA. So in 2020, he was 8th in DR and then 5th in mid DVOA. And so if you go ahead and look at 2022, so 8th and 5th overall, remember that. You look this year, he was 16th and 18th. So again, you want to be efficient in the middle of the field. It's been so important for this offense. It's been so important for Josh Allen because, again, it's the biggest part of the field. The middle is the biggest part of the field. And the Bills just avoided it in so many ways. And again, maybe it had to do with the drops. Maybe it had to do with the interceptions and turnovers. Either way, they need to find someone that Josh Allen trusts and has a rapport with in the middle so that they can be a threat in there to open things up outside in a more efficient way where they're just not chucking it deep on 2nd and 10.
Being able to attack the middle of the field, exactly you said, it opens up all the other avenues. Just even in the short, on the outside or in the median on the outside or just deep, you need to be able to work that part of the field, one, to open up the other areas, but two, just because you need to stay versatile, you cannot have a section of the field closed off to you at any point, but especially the middle, even just from a physics standpoint. Think of what's easier if you're completing a pass 5 yards in front of you or 5 yards outside the numbers. Because that 5-yard throw outside the numbers is actually a longer throw. It's a harder throw. Usually you have to layer a little bit.
And less space the further outside you throw. So how much yak are you giving up by not attacking the middle of the field?
It's a harder piece. And, you see the question coming in from John saying, did the loss of Crowder hurt? I potentially, if you want to make that case, maybe. But even before, I mentioned it earlier, granted the sample size will influence things, but even before he got hurt, the chemistry with Josh wasn't there. The feel for the inside. He didn't quite
have the playbook down.
No, it was. And again, it's hard to be a receiver in this Bills offense. We heard Tavon Austin talk about it. We've heard a bunch of receivers talk about it. And I also want to bring it up because I kind of want to pat myself on the back. I can't tell you how many people got at me on Twitter who, when I said, man, Cole Beasley will be missed, and it was like July, and they were like, no, Jamison Crowder is going to be better. He's like 0.5 more yards after catch in his career than Beasley. He's going to be so much better.
He played with bad quarterbacks, so
yeah. He never had anybody like Josh. It's hard to fill that role. And I think we saw not only how important this role is, but how hard it can be to fill it. And, you know, we saw flashes from Isaiah McKenzie in training camp. Like, I think, Eric, you and I don't want to speak for you, but we were very encouraged by what Isaiah McKenzie did in training camp. We saw him running Cole Beasley like routes.
Yeah, the route running stood out.
Yes. So we weren't even thinking Crowder. We were thinking, well, this is going to be Isaiah McKenzie's spot. Fingers crossed, we'll see it. And it just didn't translate. And then even for Crowder, you know, yeah, maybe he could have turned into that guy as the season progressed, but it's a big maybe because before he got hurt, it was real wishy-washy in terms of what he was going to be for this offense.